Hi everybody, this is Alex. Just uploading my Module 3 discussion video. Sorry it's a little late, I had some issues with the charts appearing kind of weird ways this afternoon, so I had to sort of mess around with that to get everything right. I'll try and keep this video a little shorter than my last one, but yeah, let's just jump right into stuff here. So I pulled some of the data from quiz scores through Module 3 from the last class that were available on the course website. I changed up the tables a little bit, and I highlighted these two columns just to uh, notify everyone that I had changed them from the values that actually are on the table provided. What I was really interested in doing here was basically totaling the quiz scores for each student and the discussion scores for each student and comparing them basically to see if there is some kind of correlation between the two. Just did some quick sum functions there for each of these rows. So it's just a quick little it spans just those three cells there, and it just I use the drop down function where you can just kind of pull it and it'll copy everything down. It did give me some errors here, which you might see, and you can just tell it to ignore that. Basically, it's just concerned you have data on either side. Sorry, I just wanted to point out a couple things like that because I was running into all sorts of interesting stuff. Again, in my version of Excel is probably a lot different than some other people's because it is a tad older. So yeah, just wanted to give a quick overview of that, and we'll jump into the statistics here. So I just brought that total data over, and I kind of trimmed off the extra decimal points just to make them fit into the bins a little easier. It's not going to spit out exactly the same averages as it will in my other table, but just close enough to get an idea of what's going on. So I also color coded them so you can see what goes where, because I had a little confusion with that while I was working on it. So I just did real quick frequency distributions for each score type, and then I set both of these tables at 7 to 30, just so they were more directly comparable. I also put the frequency all the way up to 7, so there's a lot of empty space up here on this one. It was a little more uniform, but we still definitely have kind of a negative skew here, and a much stronger negative skew on the discussion scores. Not really a whole ton to look at there. There were like some kind of half points and stuff, so that definitely may be influencing some of the evening out here that we're seeing. Range on the quiz score distribution was 7 to 30. The mean or the average was 21.5. 1, and the median was 22.5. So we're kind of sitting right in here for the middle of it. Definitely not symmetrical. I looked at folding it, I think it was like right about 19 and a half or so for each of these if you look at kind of where a lot of the data points were setting. And so folding it in half there would really not give you much of a symmetrical distribution. So because of that, mean and standard deviation are probably not going to be the greatest way to explain either of these data sets by, so I did also run the interquartile range on them. Actually, it was 8.5 for each, which I thought was kind of interesting. So they are sitting, they have kind of a similar distribution despite the fact that they look a lot different, which is sort of strange to me. And then the standard deviation was close, but obviously there's a bit of difference there. This one's obviously stretched a little more just because it has so much data on the 28, and then it has kind of several data points that are further down here, so it's definitely pulled out a little bit further. I guess that's really all I have to say on that. So I'll jump over here to the correlation. So I added some ID numbers and I took it back out to two decimal places here just to be a little bit more accurate, because the scores did have, by the time I got through all three quizzes, had like quarter points, half points, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to be able to account for that and get these dots plotted a little more accurately. You can see that the mean is a little bit different than what it was. It's like 23.29 and 21.5 over here, and it's like 23.3 and 22.5 there. So not a lot of difference, but definitely worth noting that, you know, taking those decimal places off, rounding early does impact that. And then of course we got the same standard deviation because I was just using the same data set and the Excel function to calculate that with. So I just dropped in a line here, and actually now I'm forgetting how I did it. Let's say it's somewhere in the chart area. It's really goofy because I'm like watching the Excel videos for one type of Excel, and then I have a Mac version myself. Oh, great, now it's lagging. I have a Mac version myself, and it's older, so there's just a lot of strange placement of things on here, so I'm still kind of getting used to that. Anyway, I was able to find this and drop it in and calculate the slopes and the intercepts. The correlation coefficient of 0.815 is relatively strong, and I mean you can see just looking at the way the data lays out here, there's a lot of points that fall relatively close to this line. You see a large cluster up here of students that did, you know, well on kind of all of the discussion assignments and all of the quizzes. So it's a lot of points that kind of right in this. I think it's like 27 or so, maybe 20, 28, kind of right in that range. And then there's this this one point down here is probably an outlier, is what I would say. It's iffy. I didn't get a chance to take that out and see if it would chart up a whole lot differently, but I'm willing to say that's worth looking at. It's pretty interesting. Whoever this person was worked very well on the discussion assignments, and then did not do so great on the quizzes. Yeah, we also did just the trend line equation there. Excel will just drop that in for you, and I just put that in to sort of check my work and make sure this was calculated out right, which it seems to be. So yeah, in context, basically that means that the correlation coefficient means that the students who tended to do better on the discussion assignments also tended to do better on the quizzes. And the reason I was interested in that is because so far in this class we have the discussion assignments due prior to the quizzes, so I wanted to see basically if it seemed like people who were grasping the concepts in discussion were able to also apply that effectively on the quiz. So that's why I had the discussion assignment here as the explanatory variable, and then your quiz score as sort of the predicted variable. And with this trend line equation here, we can basically say that if you had a score of, let's say, 20 or so on the quiz, you just go 0.776 times 20 plus 3.3693 would approximate your score on a quiz. So we're looking at about 18.9 or about 19 points on those three quizzes. So if that was your total score across the three discussion assignments, you'd be sitting right around here. You know, it's exactly on the trend line. But so I thought it was definitely interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. Oh, I was going to really quick show you guys what was going on with my my charts over here is what I struggled with. And so I was just doing, actually figured out how to do these, they call it a column in my version of Excel. So you have the bar chart is sideways one and the column is straight up and down. So that's why my bar charts were sideways in the last video. Anyway, you go to chart this up and it drops all this data in, but it does it in a really goofy way. I'm not sure what's happening here. Why is it not working? Try it again. Oh, there we go. So it's like it's putting them next to each other and not setting them up against one another. So what I actually had to do was like go in and just delete out all those values. And you can actually go into, on my version anyway, select data for the chart. It's just a right click for me, and you can specify your chart data range. So I wanted to go back in and basically tell it, look at all of this data, and then it's still doing that. And then it was the orange one. Yeah, we want to remove that, so it'll just take that out. It's basically what I did with the delete key. And then you're going back in and you have to tell it the x-axis labels are the scores. So it's not just assigning numbers there. So once you do that, then it sort of resets and gives us the data range that we actually wanted. And then you have to do a bunch of fiddling with the axes here. You can go in and do format axis, sort of tell it what you want the scale to be. So I actually went going with a 7, just so they would be a little more comparable. That's not what I meant. Major unit 1, max 7. And we'll just throw that out because I don't really care about that one. And so then that starts to look a little bit more. It always does this, so I have to delete those out. And then, of course, you just put your labels on. But as you can see, that is, geez Louise. So you can see why I was struggling a little bit with this. This is kind of goofy, but you can see it's basically the same chart once you get all your labels on and everything. So, so that's how I was doing that, and it took me a lot longer than it should have to figure out how to manipulate all that. But I hope no one else is having quite so many Excel issues as I am, and I really wish I could figure out how to get the online version of it to work, but I couldn't even get it to draw a chart in there, so I had to hop back onto my own computer owned version. So thanks very much for putting up with me and kind of some of that goofy stuff there, and hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Talk to you later.